And guys, before we jump onto Champ Select, I don't want to ask the pressure that's on Fnatic Rising's shoulders right now. These kids, the lack of experience they have maybe, and the fact that they're facing off against the spring champions, how much is it playing for them right now, especially going into this potential last game?
I mean, you've seen what happened to Spring and BTXL, where they managed to grab one game and then Karma Corp came in hard and took all the other three. Right now, they're sitting with their backs against the wall. They're 0-2. What else do they have in store? I feel like this is, again, where you scrap everything you've seen so far and you try to sort of go again as if this was a best of one. Because Fnatic Rising did really well in best of ones. You're like, don't think about the past. We're playing this best of one. We take it one game at a time.
Welcome back to the desk, everyone. Fnatic strikes back and find the answer here in Game 3. And we finally have a series for this summer finals. I am so happy, especially about the improvements from the Fnatic Rising side this time around. So tell me about the adaptation and what made it better this time for them.
Yeah, I think the big thing was we saw a bit of a risk left open by Karmine Corp, where they left that thresh open, then they could take the Aphelios, and then they just built this composition entirely around protect the Aphelios, right? So you got the Gangplank, who's going to be able to slow multiple different engage tools coming through from Karmine Corp. We've then got the Thresh, who's obviously going to be able to Lantrum, reposition him, make sure that he's got a bunch of safety with plays, hooks, boxes, everything else, and as well this Twisted Fate. Now, traditionally, when we think of Twisted Fate, it's like, hey, 1-3-1, looking for picks, playing sides, but this is a very different style of Twisted Fate. You are just a pill bot. You are like, I'm going to throw gold cards, I'm going to make sure that I protect this Aphelios and let Bean carry. And when Bean got these 2 quick early kills, that was the go button for this composition.
To me, looking at this Karmine Corp composition, I'm like, okay, so I'm like, it's full of playmakers. The Rakan, the Azir, the Kennen, the Lee Sin. I'm like, even if it doesn't
Your
make
mic is not working, Trouble. We're going to trash this quickly and also check maybe that everything is connected right. But you were saying the Karmine Corp composition was maybe a hard one to play. That talk me through what they wanted to do here, because you can see that they're looking for a specific setup around the Kennen, around the Azir. But how hard is it to make this composition work?
Oh, it's next to impossible. Like, usually when you think, okay, like we've got like Rakans, we've got Engages, we've got all these different tools that you can use, you're like, okay, well, we'll jump onto the Aphelios and it'll be fine. But as you said, you've got Twisted Fate peel, you've got Gangplank peel, the Thresh is making it incredibly difficult. And I really didn't like kind of the priority that we saw coming through from the Karmine Corp side. I would have much preferred to see, instead of the Azir coming in that third pick, something like a Jace. Because one of the big things that Aphelios struggles with is compositions with range. So if you go for the Lee Sin, Ezreal, and then the Jace, you've got great peel tools coming through in the Lee Sin. You've got long range poke coming through from the Ezreal and the Jace. And then, like, if they ban the Azir, it's not the end of the world. You can still go for some of these long-range poke-orientated champions. I felt like it was just kind of a mismanagement of Karmine Corp about the priority they needed to place onto this Azir.
Trouble, welcome back to the desk.
This one is working, guys, and you can hear me now. So, looking at the Karmine Corp composition, I'm seeing so many playmakers, the Rakan, the Azir, the Lee Sin, the Kennen. I'm like, wow, if anyone's going to make this composition work, it is Karmine Corp. Looking on the other side of Fnatic, immobile champion in the top lane, immobile champion in the mid lane, immobile champion as ADC as well. I'm like, if Seiken gets one of these miracle shuffles into the Kennen ult, and mind you, there's like a lot of ifs, but if somebody can pull it off, it would be someone like Karmine Corp. We've seen so many wacky picks coming out of them back in spring as well. And if somebody's like ballsy enough to pull something that technically in your mind would never work, because these guys have so much range, you should never reach them, but these guys would. We saw some fights get so close where you're like, had Kennen held on to his ultimate 1 second longer, had Seiken shuffled one more member, had one flash not been there, but there's like so many factors and so many ifs that you had to like line up that it just made it so hard for Karmine Corp to execute.
And it sucked because even when we got like what looked like the miracle fight that Troll was describing, there was an exhaust. I was just like, oh, all right, well, GG, try again, lads. Like, it was really, really hard to operate, and it felt like you kind of put yourselves into a corner as Karmine Corp with this composition, which I think has been really surprising, because honestly, I think Karmine Corp's drafting so far has been pretty spectacular, but you can see they tried to put the pressure onto Bean in this early stages, but once he got that double kill at about the 8-minute mark, that was the, oh, we're just coming online, and we're going to be able to play this perfectly as Fnatic Rising.
And I thought that after getting this double kill, especially onto Xmati, they were going to use him around these dragons to try and use that Sheen that was early on purchased, use the power of the Ezreal. But it felt like Fnatic Rising came into these fights much more prepared. It felt like the Thresh was creating so much room, the Gangplank was creating so much room, and once Maxi again onto that Viego got going, there was no stopping him. I feel like we haven't talked about Maxi enough. I felt like in this entire series, even in the 2 games that Fnatic Rising lost, he has been a completely different beast.
It's been a lot about the junglers, mostly this series, Dagda.
Yeah, I think a huge amount. I mean, I think Synchro, unfortunately, from this Lee Sin really wasn't the pick here. We saw him kind of overforce plays, feeling like he needed to do things on the map because the scaling advantage was on Fnatic Rising's favor, and it kind of came back to bite them. And I think Maxi played absolutely fantastically. And again, like, he was another tool that could be the carry. You can see this fight here, right?
Yeah.
You've been ping-ponging all over the place. You get that exhaust, but you still now have to deal with Maxi because he's picked up a ton of these kills in the early stages. He's ripping around the fights, the triple kill here for himself as well. It just felt like no matter what you did, there was too many different carries that you had to deal with once you had the Viego and the Aphelios coming online.
I am baffled looking at this goal graph and the damage here. Oh, how is that so?
I feel like a lot of these fights, Seiken played them really well onto that Azir. He's 100% win rate.
Yeah.
Is for a reason. He's absolutely nuts onto the champion. And usually you would think of an Azir pick as going up against a bunch of melees or hard engage and like shoving them back out. But I felt like he did the utmost trying to create the opportunities for the Kennen. The second he would see Cabochard, he would try to shuffle people towards him, getting that lockdown. And you saw that even when Kamenkop loses, their carries actually perform. My eyes are still on Xmati's Ezreal because they haven't been able to get him off the pick, and he has performed time after time after time in 3 games back to back.
Yeah, I think coming into this, I wasn't the biggest fan seeing the Varus ban come in and that 3rd ban coming through for Karmine Corp. I think stick to the Thresh ban. I think Aphelios is such a powerful champion, especially with the flexibility you can see in the builds. Like, we saw the kind of the more, hey, I'm going to carry mid-game build and be a little bit less resistant to being burst. You got the not Bloodthirster, what's the word I'm looking for? The Mythic Shield Bow, thank you. Yeah, the Immortal Shield Bow came through. You end up going then for the Collector as well, which gives you a lot of power in those early stages. You come on a lot sooner, but because you've got that shield from the Immortal Shield Bow, it's a hell of a lot more difficult to try and pop you straight off the bat, quickly in towards the GA2, which means you've got the access to the stopwatch. It made it very difficult to deal with Bean. So when you put all your eggs into dealing with this Aphelios, well, then you've still got Viego. You still have other carries that are available on the side, and it just became too hot to handle.
Yeah, and that's something we noticed throughout the later stages of the game, especially the team fight setups trouble. There's one in particular that we want to look at on bot lane, if I'm not mistaken. And we've been talking about how the mid lane for Fnatic Rising was difficult, but this time around it feels like they had a perfect mid game, and that's what gives them the ability to come into this fight so easily. Let's check it out.
Yeah, I felt like after the 2 kills going on to be inside, and especially like Dagda mentioned, the shield bow coming in, you see that again, Kamenkop are trying to pull plays, they're trying to cut Stayer on the side, Synchro overextends, gets caught, Fnatic Rising are really quick to pull the trigger, Pride comes in, the Gangplank ultimate creates so much space, the Thresh ultimate creates so much space, and once Seiken has already used his shuffle, it's so much easier to stick on him. You see in this particular fight that Cabochard did not have a way to hit anyone. He pops his R and no one gets hit by it. Everyone just walks out straight the card out of jail.
And one of the big issues for this composition is that you could try and play a range, right? You've got Nazir, you've got Nezri, you've got these kind of things, but you can see like you're always forced to engage as Karmine Corp because you're worried about things like the Gangplank gold slowing you down, making it a bit hot, like difficult to move. You're then going to have the Aphelios close the gap, and that's where you really start to struggle. So it felt like you had to throw these quick plays at Fnatic Rising as Karmine Corp, and they just couldn't quite coordinate them properly.
Yeah, it was super hard, especially with this comp. Now, before we dive onto the next game, I want to touch on the fact that K-Corp chose blue once again, and we have 100% win rate from blue side tonight. It's horrible.
So it's like a blue wall or something.
It's a blue, right? Nice one. And we'll see. Fnatic Rising found what they needed in game 3, and let's see if they can